Hello and welcome. What I have here is a full viewport parallax header that is in pure HTML5 and CSS3. It creates a nice effect, nice basic effect. It's visually pleasing to any user or client that you will have visiting your website or application. This is the finished product, and it will induce no migraines in order to get it up and running properly. The animation also, the effect itself will not hinder performance in the slightest bit. It's very minimal, it's very intuitive, it's very easy to grasp. Now, this is the markup with the CSS. It's all in one document so that I don't have to keep flicking back and forth. Altogether, it's 137 lines of code, or markup, however you want to put it. So relatively small. First off, include normalize in your project. You should be including this in probably all of your projects. It's just something to standardize the development stage for you. Basic markup. We give everything a box sizing of border box. This just allows for an easier development, an easier design experience. I also set the HTML, the body, the header, and the sections of the website and web application to a height of 100% of the viewport. And of course, I set the position to relative in order for all the children elements of said elements to be mapped to the parent directly. Next thing I do is I remove all the margin and padding from every single element on the actual document. This prevents any weird and obscure designs to be a result from these styles. The next thing I do is I get rid of the HTML overflow. I hide it completely. Sometimes the HTML overflow wants to do its own thing with just whatever. I don't know why. So I hide it in almost every one of my projects. And I give the body a different overflow perspective. I hide the X overflow, and I let the Y overflow, scrolling up and down, work normally. Next, I utilize a helper class that I have in a lot of my projects. It allows for better manipulation of any image that you're utilizing as a background. This works primarily with images and background images that are at a set height and width. You don't want to utilize this in elements where the element itself needs to conform to the image's height and width or dimensions of it. This comment right here is for a little reference point. I have this included in any Parallax project that I utilize in order for other developers and designers to get a grasp of what my thought process is. I will be referring to this in the video later in time in order to give you guys a better idea. But first, as you guys probably noticed from this point on, I'm utilizing a reference from Keith Clark's Pure CSS Parallax, and this is this is from his article called Practical CSS Parallax. This allows for perspective for any browsers that do not support perspective, and especially iOS users, to cancel out the perspective and the parallax effect in its entirety. The reason for this is because it does not work properly on iOS. It jumps around and it fires weird, and it's just, I don't want to find a workaround for it, because in fact there are no workarounds for it. It's just how iOS performs, it's how the browsers work. It's upsetting to some degree, but not really, since I don't really care for Apple or iOS. Now, let me begin. Perspective is easy to explain, as it is just the distance in pixels that a 3D element is placed from the view, or from the user, or from the screen, however you want to put it. Anything that is placed on the z-axis higher than its parent's perspective will not be rendered, as it will be behind the view, behind the user, behind the screen. Again, it's however you like to say it. Now, in order for perspective to work properly, you need to set the transform style to preserve 3D on every browser. The reason for this is that this will now place all of its children elements in a 3D space. This will allow for Translate Z to perform properly with scale in order to give us the most opportune, ideal, and optimized effect. I skipped over these two styles right here because these are quick fixes. Actually, not even quick fixes, these are permanent fixes for certain browsers. The first one here, Perspective Origin, 100%, is part one of a two-part fix for all WebKit browsers. This just helps correct the width of the element as it sometimes is obscured in the rendering process. I don't know why, but this fixes it every time. The Transform Z is required on the body element for Microsoft Edge to display the entire page properly. If this is not here, sometimes the page won't display at all, sometimes this page will display in an obscure manner. This corrects it so that every single time it works. I did not mention this, but perspective and transform style do not need to be placed on the body. They can be placed on a child element that is holding the parallax event as well. So if you wanted to, you can put these inside of another element. If you do not want to manipulate the body itself, if you feel that you can't do that or you shouldn't do that, you can place it inside of another parent element and affix the perspective and the transform style to the parent element. Now let me get on to the next body of CSS here. This is a fix for Mozilla, Firefox, anything that utilizes Firefox or Mozilla's browsing experiences. This works. This also takes into consideration the mobile version of Firefox. Now, the reason why this is because Firefox defines inherit differently. For some reason, it will not inherit transform style from a parent element. Therefore, you have to explicitly add this, and it fixes it so that the element doesn't look blown up to all holy hell, and so the effect works. This just makes sure that the effect works. This is absolutely necessary if you are working with Firefox as well. Next, we get into the background image. This is the parallax event in my particular case. In your case, it could be text. In your case, it could be a smaller image in the header. It doesn't matter. This will essentially work the exact same way. First thing we touch is the transform, translate Z, and scale. Now, the translate Z is going to be -1. It's always going to be a negative number in our case, considering that we are utilizing a one pixel perspective. Now, we have to calculate scale from our translate Z. So in order to get scale to 2, I'm going to show you this. This is for individuals that use a different perspective. Now there's an easier way of calculating this. In my case, if I'm using a perspective of 1. What you can do is just make this positive, and then add 1 to it, and get rid of the pixels, and that is your scale. It's quite simple, especially if you're utilizing a perspective of 1. But let's say you're not using a perspective of 1. You would need this equation to get the proper scale. Transform origin is part 2 of that WebKit fix. Again, this just corrects the width of the element so that it does not look obscured and deformed when you render the page. Body section z-index1 is necessary, as it says here, set z-index to 1 to all remaining groups that are not utilizing parallax. This ensures that the parallax object goes behind everything else. That's really it. I'm just setting the background image here, which is the pleasant beach. And this is just vertically aligning the text in the header. If we remove this, this would go to the top, and I can show you that in a very simple manner. As you can see, it just goes straight to the top. And we set the sections to a background color of white. Now, it doesn't need to be white, it can be whatever color you want, or it can even be an image. But I do not recommend you getting rid of this style entirely, as without it, it will look quite funky. So just show you that, let me just render it, as you can see, this is our section right here, and you can still see the rendering. It just looks quite odd. So try to include the background color. If you don't want to and you like that effect, then keep it by all means, but background color of white at the very least works. And that is about it. You guys have seen the HTML for this as well. It's quite simple. In my case, I would put the rest of the website or the rest of the application in this section, or you can break it into other sections. It doesn't matter. As long as you're not utilizing another header element, or you can even put an ID on the header so that you can use other header elements, it really is up to you. The reason I vertically align this is for a call to action format, and it's by default. I have on this template here. It helps me quicken my development speed, and it just makes life so much easier for me. Now that is really it for the Parallax Header, and if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. Thanks for watching.